bit about podcasts. According to the PRB, which is the Population Reference Bureau, the average commute for a person is 26 minutes one way. In that time, how many times can we honestly listen to a Taylor Swift song? 100? I know Bad Blood is good, but we can listen to other things. Podcasts are an audio or a visual file, mostly audio. That's what we'll be talking about today. Regarding a segment or a topic, which is a program that is distributed in multiple episodes. It can be informative, educational, or just have comedic value. There are thousands upon thousands on iTunes available for enjoyable listening. The history of podcasts, the first notable time that somebody actually talked about it online in the internet was around 2004. It was actually brought up in two different spots. One is on an iPod Apple blogging site. And actually, the name podcast actually comes from Apple site with the pod being in there. So, and most of the time, probably almost all people get their podcasts from iTunes. So, the next time that podcasts actually came onto the scene was in February of 2005, and there was about 10 of them out there. USA Today had a list of top 10 podcasts. 4 were tech, 3 were music, 1 was movies, 1 was a political podcast, and 1 was a chatting podcast, which most are like now, and apparently it was called Married Couple Banter. So who knows? So now, like I had mentioned earlier, there's probably thousands and thousands and thousands that you can pick from. Almost every comedian has their own. Musical people have them. There's tons of them. More and more recently, people have become aware of podcasts. Most recently in 2015 to the podcast that I will be showing or we will be listening to as our visual aid, which is called Serial. Serial started on NPR, and it was from the producers of This American Life, which is a very well-known podcast that actually also started in 2005, and I believe it was later on. And it's actually a show on NPR, but they have made it into a podcast form, which is now how everybody usually listens to it. So Serial started, and it became a absolute phenomenon out of the gate. So we're going to listen to about a minute or two of it, and then I will come back and give you my recommendations of new podcasts. So just keep it rolling.
This is a Global Kelly prepaid call from
Adnan Sayed.
an inmate at the Maryland Correctional Facility.
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial. One story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig. For the last year, I've spent every working day trying to figure out where a high school kid was for an hour after school one day in 1999. Or if you want to get technical about it, and apparently I do, where a high school kid was for 21 minutes after school one day in 1999. This search sometimes feels undignified on my part. I've had to ask about teenagers' sex lives, where, how often, with whom, about notes they passed in class, about their drug habits, their relationships with their parents. And I'm not a detective or a private investigator. I'm not even a crime reporter. But yes, every day this year, I've tried to figure out the alibi of a 17-year-old boy. Before I get into why I've been doing this, I just want to point out something I'd never really thought about before I started working on this story. And that is, it's really hard to account for your time in a detailed way, I mean.
Okay, that was just a snippet of Serial the podcast. Going into this, there was a huge jump from 2013 to 2015 in podcast listening. It was pretty much the same level. More recently, about 46 million people the age of 12 years or older listen to podcasts, and they feel that it has skyrocketed from previously because of this serial podcast. People just went crazy for it. The basis of it was there was a murder in Baltimore of a high school student. She went missing. They found her and they put her ex-boyfriend in. He was found guilty of her murder. Well, you have to listen to the podcast, but it goes on and on. It's great. It's great, and it just keeps you engaged, and it's just a phenomenal podcast. So with that, and also another statistic, American podcast listeners spent an average of 6 hours per day listening to radio, while the average American listens to 4 hours of audio content a day. And they're saying that that is starting to rival actual radio to audio, which they're speaking of podcasts in this one. Just a few podcasts that I personally love listening to. I have a quick PowerPoint here. First one is This American Life. Now this is the parent to Serial. And it's an hour long each week, different topics, and it's fantastic. Is it okay?
You can't really see it, but you're good.
Oh, okay. The next one is Serial. We went over that. The next one is called Oh Yeah Do. Now this is a comedy podcast. It's a little unsafe for younger ears, so you might not want to listen to that, but it is hysterical and very, very funny. My husband got me onto this one. We lived in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, and traveled a lot of places, and we would listen to this on the road, and it's just very funny. Give it a chance. You'll love it. The next one is The Moth. It's kind of like This American Life. Little different. It's different topics told by different people, and it's actually recorded in front of a live audience, and then it's put all together and then put onto the podcast. Very great, really interesting. And the last two are Startup and Reply All, which is by Gimlet Media, which was started by Alex Bloomberg, who was a producer of This American Life, and he went off to start his own, and that's actually the startup. The season 1 is about how he wanted to start up this Gimlet Media and all his trials and tribulations of doing it. Excellent podcast. Really super easy to listen to. Just a very, very good podcast. Reply All is also really great. It's about all things technology and internet, and it's very interesting. They have funny stories that you'd think, that's probably pretty boring. They get stories from you wouldn't even believe. The person that actually started and designed pop-ups, and it was one of them. It was called The Most Hated Man on Earth. It was very, very funny, very interesting. So check those out. Give it a chance. See if you like them. Thanks.
Yay!